Ever wonder why some leaders stay calm under any type of pressure? In this episode, Heather Hakes reveals how self-regulation, mindfulness, and clarity can transform your leadership. Learn how aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions can help you lead with true power, avoid burnout, and build highly functional and collaborative teams. Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world. Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen. Welcome to today's episode of Rise to Lead. I'm super thrilled to introduce today's fabulous guest, Heather Hakes. Welcome to the Rise to Lead show, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on the other side.
Yes, we've done a podcast episode together for your podcast. So I am really, really happy to return the invitation. And it's not always a fit, but in this case it was because of the fabulous topics that you also suggested for the show. So I'm excited to be speaking with you. Now, before we dive into this, Heather, let me quickly introduce you to our listeners. Heather Hakes is a mindset coach. She's a speaker and author of Take the Leap. She has been featured on numerous podcasts and published in Authority magazine, in Thrive Global, in Voyage Denver, and Women Who Empower and Inspire. Heather has reached hundreds of thousands in more than 100 countries through her podcast, Mind Over Matter. Heather specializes in helping others get out of their own way by awakening their infinite potential to create their ideal life. It's very similar to my intention of helping people create what I call their freaking amazing life. So I love this, Heather. Heather is a graduate of Tony Robbins Mastery University and Gabby Bernstein's Spirit Junkie Masterclass. She also studied Abraham Hicks, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and Bob Proctor's Principle of Alignment, Brain and Heart Coherence, and Shifting Paradigms for Personal Mastery. She manifested 6 figures after taking the leap to quit corporate by aligning her true passion and purpose, and is now on a mission to help others overcome their blocks through her transformative coaching programs. Okay, Heather, sounds awesome. Let's dive right into our topics for today. Are you ready?
Let's go.
I guess you're always ready. As a mindset coach, right? So in just a few sentences, Heather, tell us more about Heather Hakes and why you decided to specifically go into mindset coaching.
It's interesting that when you follow the intuitive nudges, which we all have access to, life unfolds much better than we could have ever expected. But a little bit of background, my dream as a little girl was to be a teacher. And then I remember getting to college, found out they made $35,000 a year. And I was like, that's not going to work for me. So I went the traditional route. I got a general bachelor's degree in communications and marketing, and then I got my paralegal degree, and I climbed the corporate ladder. And by the time I hit 30, I was unhappy, unfulfilled, going through life's motions, which I know a lot of people can relate to, that autopilot monotony, just feeling stuck. I've always been into psychology and human potential and reading self-help books since I was an early teen. And so, long story short, I took a leap of faith. I had no plan, but I quit my job. I followed that nudge. Like I had been feeling unsettled for a while and that I was meant for more. So I followed the nudge, ended up with a six-figure payout from the company had gone public. And everything that I do now has just unfolded. I was led into podcasting, which turned into coaching, and now doing what I do. And I get to bring it full circle. I am now teaching people the power of mindset and creating your ideal life, which is what, my younger self wanted, but it's in a completely different avenue than I could have ever planned.
Okay, that sounds like the dream story a little bit. That's awesome. Yes, and many of our listeners are probably quite aware, maybe not of all the names that I mentioned when reading your bio, but at least some of the names, and they are maybe familiar with the work of some of these people. For example, we said Bob Proctor, Gabby Bernstein, Joe Dispenza, Abraham Hicks, Tony Robbins, and many of our listeners have likely experienced at least some of it, right? They might not have studied as much of it as you did and as deeply as you did. What I'm curious about now, tell us what makes your approach unique? What makes it your approach, your method, the Heather Hakes method?
In business, the one pain point that I had that for years I struggled, which was creating that ideal avatar. The exercises take you through creating the hypothetical person and what is their background and their interest. And it was very hard for me to connect with that. And then one day it clicked.
Mhm.
I am my avatar. I am
Mhm.
my ideal client. And when I started literally speaking to my younger self, which could be yesterday, last week, 6 months ago, it really connected. And there was a point in my life, especially in personal development. Tony Robbins is a prime example. He's all about full immersion, which I do agree. But I got wrapped up in chasing the high. I drank the Kool-Aid, attended 7 events in 9 months, and the energy and the environment that he creates is, it's very addictive. But here's what tripped most people up, and I heard it time and time again going to all these events because it was pretty much the same people. We become self-help junkies, and somehow we think, but I'm reading the books and I paid for courses and I'm listening to the podcast, but we're lacking implementation and application. And that's where I found myself. I became a self-help junkie. I was constantly consuming, but not applying. So, as you asked, my approach is I have taken all of these, and that's what I do. I'm very curious. And so I've learned from Tony Robbins and I've learned the science and neuroscience and quantum physics behind how we work. But I've taken bits and pieces from all of these different teachers, created digestible, practical, tangible takeaways. And now I've created like frameworks that are very simple to apply. And that's what it comes down to. When you learn the information and you show up every single day applying it and being curious and staying conscious and aware, that is how you create the change that you seek in your life.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned this self-help junkies, right? So many people are self-help junkies. It's definitely a contagious atmosphere at these types of events. And then you go home and then you are in your usual environment and you fall back into your old patterns because that's how we are programmed in a way, right? We adapt quickly. Sometimes we adapt too quickly, almost, right? Because adaptability is a really important trait also for leaders. However, sometimes we adapt in ways that don't serve us, right? So this is why I was so curious about your very own way of doing this, because as you said, you put it into simpler frameworks. I always say simple is good.
Yeah.
Because that's what we actually do.
Well, that's why the truth is change is simple. It comes down to three things.
Mhm.
There are three things that create every result in your life.
Okay.
Your thoughts are the first domino. Your thoughts then create your emotions and feelings, which lead to your behaviors or habits and create every outcome. So
Mhm.
you can reverse engineer that and realize if you aren't happy financially, which most people's pain points is money and relationships, if you aren't happy or satisfied or fulfilled in an area of life, pay attention to your actions. Procrastination, inconsistent, overwhelmed, distracted. Pay attention to your emotions, fear, doubt, worry, stress. And it all stems from limiting beliefs. When you pull the weeds and plant new seeds, that's how you create the change. So I want people to know it's simple. It's not necessarily easy at first, but neither is learning any new skill. But change is possible.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot about the limiting beliefs. It's also, in my opinion, about, if I might add that, about undigested feelings. You mentioned fear, you mentioned some other emotions, and in the end, it all boils down really to fear, to sadness, and little else. Because it's all like some variation of those in the end, most of the time, right?
This is so timely. I literally, right before the start of our call, just did a post about your thoughts and emotions can liberate or enslave you.
Mhm.
And you'll know by your current results. And that's the big thing with emotions. I especially have so much compassion for men. Men have been taught to suppress. And literally, when we suppress and we don't feel emotions, it literally gets stored in the body. And that's when we start living in quote survival mode. And you can't create change from there.
Exactly. I totally agree. And we women do it too. I know what you mean when you say, yes, men have been, educated into this more than we women, but we women are also often told, don't be so emotional.
Right.
At work, it's not a good thing to be emotional, or, and so it's become this almost stigma in our society to feel our emotions. And I'm not saying you should be crying all the time or whatever, right? That's not what that is. It's about feeling those emotions and allowing them to be released, not necessarily at your desk in your office, but you can do it at home, right? So let's talk about how all of this that we've been talking about is important for leaders and for leadership. I think we all agree that mindset is key for leaders and leadership, right? Why is it so
I,
important specifically because this is also the theme of this podcast, for bold and heart-centered leadership, in your opinion?
I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. And what I say all of the time is if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others.
Mhm.
And when you don't know how to self regulate through breath work or mindfulness or intentional practices, when you're constantly living in reactive mode, when you're living in those stress emotions, you can't scale the business, you can't lead others. And so you're going to stay stagnant, plateau, or fall back.
Exactly. Yes, it's totally aligned with what I believe too. Self-leadership is always first.
Yeah.
Yes, leading self is the fundament of leading other people effectively and sustainably, because you can of course play a role for a while, but after a while people see through it. And if they notice that you're not able to lead yourself, and first through your mindset and some other elements, right, but very importantly your mindset, then why would they trust you as a leader?
Right.
Right. So we both know also, and this comes with what you just said, Heather, we both know that leading by example is more effective than leading purely with words, right? So how is this related to a leader's mindset? Explain to us.
Do you know, my tech guy, and I had this on a post-it on my desk, but he says congruency equals income. So it's really easy to say, do as I say, not as I do. And that's actually one of my morning affirmations. I lead by example. I know that the tools and frameworks that I teach work. And as long as I am applying them and living up to them, leading by example, congruency equals income.
Yes. Yes. So being consistent, being congruent, being aligned aligned with what, right? That's always a question. We talk so much about alignment, but alignment, what is that really? What is it for you, Heather?
For me, alignment is pretty simple. It's just if you know what you want, the alignment is your thoughts and emotions and actions. So if I am thinking and feeling in aligned with my ideal outcome. So for example, I think this is an easy one. Money. So if you want to be a 6, 7 figure earner, whatever that dollar amount is, what would that version of you, how would they have to be showing up to get that kind of income? So that's why, for example, in 2017, when I started my business, I was full of self-doubt, procrastination, and imposter syndrome. And living in that state of being obviously didn't create consistency. I just had so much fear. And until I broke the habit of being myself, and I literally sat down, and it's one of the frameworks I work with my clients. You have to become so clear on who you are being, then get really clear what I call version 2.0. So if you're insecure, you'd have to be confident. If you're inconsistent, you have to be consistent. If you lack clarity or indecisive, you have to have a vision and be decisive. So it's pretty much the opposite of how you're being. But when you have this congruency and the aligned thoughts, feelings, and actions, the sky is not the limit, your belief system is. So when you get clear, that's why the first step is awareness, but the second one for, I believe, is creating that aim. What do you want to have, be, do, or experience? And then reverse engineer and realize who would you have to show up as. So for example, somebody who wants to lose 100 pounds. That's one question I ask people because I just want to know their mindset. Do you think someone can lose 100 pounds? I think anyone could. It's going to be a lifestyle change, but you can. So that's just the question. So in order to lose those 100 pounds, you realize it's going to be a lifestyle change. It might be meal prepping or have a meal prep service. It's getting movement. It's being more mindful about what you're consuming. But when you change your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you get the results that you want.
Yes, absolutely. So I love that. And you mentioned the breaking the habit of being yourself, which is also, of course, a book title by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm not sure if it's is it the exact book title? Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, and it is such an important concept, right? Because we always say, oh, be yourself, but it's actually not a contradiction, because when we say be yourself, that means, okay, be authentic. That's what we really mean. Be the best version of yourself. That's what I mean when I say that. But here, what we're talking about is, when we're talking about breaking the habit of being yourself, we're talking about breaking those automated habits, that autopilot that we tend to be on. And that could be a good autopilot, actually. For some people, it's good because they are programmed in a way that serves them. Yeah. But many of us didn't grow up that way. and our culture is not helpful most of the time either. So we need to do our part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
here's what that comes to mind. I just want to give a real world example. So since we're talking self-leadership, and I had a client, very financially successful. He was for sure multi-7, maybe even 8-figure earner, probably 8-figure earner. And he was young, like 42. So early 40s, making millions of dollars and stressed to the max. His marriage was in shambles. He lacked boundaries. And when we did this internal work and became aware, he was pushing and trying to rescue others because he needed to prove his worth and be validated. And when you understand that, so what we did through our coaching was, number one, he had to get really clear rather than taking on all the projects and creating burnout. He had to create systems and procedures on the work he wanted to be doing. So he got really clear. And if a project came his way that didn't fit the description, he got to say no to it. So we really helped him create boundaries. And then we talked about values, and values for him was he has a 2 and 4 year old children. He wanted to be more active and present in their life. So he ended up getting on and coaching their soccer league. He ended up getting back into jujitsu. And anyway, for him, because he had amassed the money, it was about learning how to self regulate, get out of stress and survival, set boundaries, create clarity. And now he can create a fulfilling life because he's not needing to prove his worth.
Absolutely. Validation is a big topic for a lot of people. I have
Mhm.
found that too with my clients. We put so much weight on this validation by others. And even also sometimes by ourselves. Sometimes we have this need to prove something to ourselves. I can attest to that personally, Heather. I mean, I had this thing going on, and I had to work a lot on it about having to prove to myself that I could survive by creating all these, amazing obstacles. We call them obstacles or challenges, right, in my life, because I now know that I create everything. So I created all those opportunities for me to prove that I can somehow tackle this and survive. And this is something really serious. It's not fun to do that all the time. So we don't, of course, do that consciously. We don't do it intentionally as humans. However, it seems as if it happens to us, but it doesn't happen to us. We still create it. And in a
Yeah.
way, it happens for us, of course, because we need to face it. We need to face what the underlying, well, what to call it, issue is not my favorite word, what the underlying cause is, right?
Yeah.
So what's behind that? The validation is such a big topic. And of course, also for leaders, because they are constantly in the spotlight, whether they are team leaders and looked at, by their teams. I had that role myself at a global consulting firm, so I know what it feels like, right? You want to be, as humans, we also want to be liked. And there's nothing wrong about being liked. Hopefully we are, but it's not by creating those weird things in our lives that help us get validated in subconsciously, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, even on that note, for social media marketing, I caught myself, and I'm so grateful that I had to experience what I did to have this shift in mindset. But as an example, and I didn't realize it, like as you said, unconscious, but I had gotten into a get mentality. I wanted to get engagement. I wanted to get new subscribers. I wanted to get new clients. And that getting is actually a very needy, fear based energy vibration. So when we're trying to get, we're actually repelling and creating resistance for what we want. So what I did is number one, I had to become aware, and I knew by the emotions, I just felt stress and the needy energy. And I had to shift it into, I know, because if you understand universal laws, life is a boomerang. What you put out, you get back. So I shifted into, I wanted to give so much value. And when I'm giving value because it feels good and I'm talking about things that I want to talk about, and I'm joining leaders like yourself and having these conversations, you naturally get those exchanges in return. But when you come from a get mentality, you're just creating resistance.
Yes, and you're also subconsciously actually putting out the energy of you, there's no abundance. You don't have it yet, because actually we have everything, because we create it all. So
Yeah.
the abundance is already there. It's just like, how do we um how do we take it and make something of it to have a reality of more of what we prefer, right?
Here's how I do it. Again,
Mhm.
it's a shift in mindset. Paradigm shifts
Yeah,
are everything. But
exactly.
I treat life more as a game. I understand that life is happening through me, definitely not to me. It's happening through me because your mind Go to the Hermetic principles. Your mind is the cause of every effect in your life. So when I
Mhm.
understand, when I treat it as more of a game, it's more lighthearted, I'm having fun, I'm detached from outcomes, I'm not resisting, I'm not struggling and efforting to make something happen. Completely different energy. And we're not here to struggle. We are here to thrive. Abundance is your birthright. So whenever things aren't flowing, realize you're white knuckling, you're keeping the flow from coming. So you have the power to release.
Exactly. And you also mentioned energy. So we are energy, we are consciousness, and as such, this is how we create, whether we are aware of it or not. And this is why, yes, life or reality also happens through us and not to us. And of course, also for us, right? So yeah, I I also I think one thing that I wanted to come back to that you go back to that you mentioned is, yes, a lot of leaders have that money aspect maybe, solved, and or some other aspect like the what we sometimes superficially call that success aspect. They have the title they wanted and whatnot, but they are terribly stressed, and that is not, to me, it's not real success. So how would I define success in my life, right? So we want to bring those elements together. Life is a holistic phenomenon. We want to have that holistic experience in a way. And that's what you also help your clients with, as I understand.
For sure. And you have to understand that's why, like, I'm all about the subconscious mind. I think that's probably too much to go into today. But you have to understand your programming and operating system. And we've been conditioned by parents and culture and community. But if you think about it, we've been conditioned into this hustle and grind mentality. We've put it on a pedestal, and it's almost as if it's like honorary. I'm more stressed and burned out than you are. So again, this is a paradigm shift, but if you're not happy, if you're stressed out, if your sleep and relationships and health are affected, it's time to start doing things differently.
Absolutely. Well, we were born into a system where where this is done on purpose, right? Let's just be
Yeah.
clear. I mean, we are here in the mindset, in, in the vision of some people, a few people, to serve the system, and we need to break out of this. And this is how we can do it.
We have 100% been programmed into fear, lack, and limitation. And
Exactly.
what if our journey and our purpose here is to remember who we are and then to unlearn, like breaking the habit of being yourself, unlearn these fear, lack, and limitation paradigms and belief systems so you can break free? Because that's not what we're here for. But when you're living in fear, you're easily manipulated, and you have to understand that too. I stopped watching the news years ago. The news didn't provide one benefit. All I needed was the weather, and I have an app for that, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and actually, this is a little soon to actually announce this, but I have a program in mind which is actually going to be called Deprogram. It's just going to be called Deprogram, I think, because I've always resisted. So I still call my coaching programs usually, but I do know that I need to find a better word because we don't want to, we could say, okay, we want to reprogram, but to me, the word program alone already has this somewhat weird connotation
Mm.
because it's been used so much. It's been used by by people on purpose against people, right? Anyway, it's just a little side comment. So yeah, so from your I have another question for you now. From your specific point of view, describe to us how mindset and having a powerful vision are related.
Oh gosh. So I've trained my mindset. I'm an endurance athlete. I've done triathlons, ran marathons, but I'm constantly training myself physically because that's how I've trained myself mentally. And I call entrepreneurship personal development on steroids. But through these physical endurance feats, building that mentality of resilience, perseverance, persistence, and grit that has boiled in, like gone over into other areas of life. So without that proper mindset, so your mindset will either empower or disempower you. And again, by your current results. And when you stay conscious and aware and you have mindfulness and intentional practices, I do it every day, a meditation, setting an intention, a gratitude practice. When you stay top of mind, and of course I'm human, of course I fall unconscious or I react or get annoyed when someone cuts me off or whatever, of course. But I'm able to like reel it back in and get back on course much faster, where some people get off course for days, weeks, months. I've talked to people who've been stuck in ruts 18 months or longer. So, anyway, when you have the proper mindset and you have that vision. So remember back when I shared I was full of self-doubt, procrastination, and imposter syndrome. I again shifted it. Who would I need to be to help individuals? I created my strong why. And when you are mission driven, when you have that why, and my why was if I could help even one person, just one person, because I know how bad it feels to feel stuck and unfulfilled and going through life's motions. Having that why is creates intrinsic motivation. I want to highlight motivation is not out there. I hear it a lot. How do I
Exactly.
get and stay motivated? When you are mission driven, motivation is intrinsic. Nobody gets me out of bed to go to the gym. Nobody gets me, to create content or do the admin task. I know what I need to do to get to where I want to go. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, and absolutely agree that motivation comes from within. That's why I have never called myself a motivational speaker, for example,
Yeah.
because it doesn't make sense to me. The whole term doesn't make sense to me. And uh, it's you know you said yes, it is empowering or disempowering you. I think something else that I want to just add and that I've said over and over again is also empowerment doesn't come from outside. It also comes from inside. You can only empower yourself because the power is already inside of you.
Yeah.
It's already there. We just got to connect with it. So I cannot place that power into anyone. I just can potentially guide you or convince you somehow that it's a good idea to connect with that power, right? So, talking about power, Heather, so we often say that leaders should share power rather than using their positional power, which can be abused for power over others, right, or to control others. And so we often say, well, rather than that, of course, leaders should ideally share their power, for example, with their team members. So, what does sharing power look like to you?
Well, when you're talking about a team environment, I'm kind of going back to my corporate days.
Mhm.
Sharing power, number one, to me, it sounds like it creates a trust foundation, and you need trust with your teammates and those around you. I remember at one point, when I was in oil and gas, I had a team of 5 admins. Now I could create a lot of stress by needing to do all of the work, but I got into a mindset. Number one, I wanted to manage other people. I wanted to bring them up, and most of my admins came in and then went throughout the company. So I was constantly bringing in new admins, but I was doing that on purpose. So to share your power, you've got to learn what to delegate, because what's coming to mind is when one ship rises, they all rise. And you want to build leaders. I think a lot of people think I need to hold all the power and control. I remember one of my clients, he was really stressed and he needed to bring on other trainers, but he had a belief. So pay attention to your beliefs. He had a belief nobody could do it as good as him. You're right, because you're you, but people could do it as good as them. And it might be even better because it's coming from a different lens and angle. So build trust, and you've got to delegate to build leaders around you. It doesn't take away from you. It actually, it's going to raise the energy and the power within everyone.
Right. And then also trust your team to get the job done. So not just expect them to trust you, but also you need to trust them too. And
Yeah.
there is a way to make this easier. For example, if you take the time to really get to know your team, and then you delegate also according to strengths.
I think even in the back of the mind, some people are afraid of failure. Well, they won't
Mhm.
do it right, or they'll do something wrong. Well, failure is just feedback, and failure is inevitable, but that's how you learn and grow. So again, I just released the need to control everything because I didn't want to live in stress. And when I empowered others, then like we had a very smooth running machine.
Okay, so when you trust others to really play their part, and it's also a way of allowing them to grow, which then comes back in the form of respect for you as a leader, right? And loyalty and all the different behaviors that we actually I expect from our team. So it's a give and take. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. So yes, is there anything you would like to add to this topic, or anything that we've touched on before?
Uh, I guess just understand that like when you can win and master the inner game, you master the outer game.
Hmm? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's not as much pushing needed, and maybe none.
There's a great book, David Hawkins, Power versus Force.
Right.
Most people come from the mentality of force, struggle, effort. I have to work hard. David Goggins, his motto is stay hard. You know, again, glorifying that hustle and grind, stress, burnout. If I work 36 hours a day, I will get ahead. That's one way to do it, and it's the hard way. When you're coming from power, which is again, this higher level of consciousness, understanding your thoughts, your emotions, your energy, and you're coming from a different energy, then things like this is not woo woo, like this is real life stuff. The synchronicities, the resources, the opportunities. For example, I set out an intention before we connected. I set out an intention. I want to get in front of other people's audiences. I want to be on more podcasts. Now, I could, through force, get on a bunch of platforms, try to connect with a bunch of people, and or hire someone to, a podcast promoter. I didn't. I set the clear intention, and then cannot make this up. Within 1 week, I had 5 opportunities come to me in my inbox asking me. Power versus force, you get to decide.
Totally. Yes. Yes. And I have to say, I started this podcast only a few months ago. It was July, and I have had zero shortage of podcast guests. It is so true what you just said. It is so true. And when you talk about this power, this type of power, it's that inherent power that you have. It's not external power. It's that inherent power that we all have, and just really are asked to use. Right. So thank you so much for adding this. Where can people find you and your book and your podcast?
The best place to start, I would just go to my website. It's Heather Hakes, HAKES.com.
Mhm.
There, I have links to all my social, free resources, and ways to connect with me.
Great. And I'm also going to, of course, add those links that you shared with me to the podcast description, so people have them too. Okay, so I'm also going to quickly plug my new book here today, Living My Freaking Amazing Life, Create the Life That's Perfect for You Anywhere in the World. This is a somewhat different leadership book. I wrote this book for you, and I promise you'll get great value from the leadership insights I gained from my very eclectic experiences on 5 continents. I totally poured my heart into this book so you can benefit from the wisdom I gained for the leadership of myself and others, because I would love for you to truly step into this freedom that we discussed with Heather today, and into this freedom and the power to create your most freaking amazing life, the life that's right for you. Heather, thank you again so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the conversation.
I did as well. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your very specific methods. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you liked this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.